One of my friends was telling me that she was with Swami Kriyananda somewhere and was feeling extremely uplifted, in fact, feeling so much joy. She said to Swamiji, "What do I do when I feel all this joy?" And he basically said, "Pull it back into the spine." And it was sort of an interesting answer because we tend to think that when we feel something, we want to also share it. In fact, Swamiji himself said that his own life has been a dual path. On one hand, he has always had a deep desire to live alone, to be a hermit. In fact, he said when he was a young boy, he told his mother, "When I grow up, I want to live all by myself." And like mothers have a tendency to say to children, she said, "Yes, dear, and I'll come and live with you." And Swamiji said, as a young boy, he was very sensitive even as a child. He didn't want to hurt her feelings, but the very idea that she might come with him spoiled everything as far as he was concerned. Not because she was his mother, but because the image in his mind was that he would live completely alone. It's a sort of a peculiar image for the average person, isn't it? Because we're not only enjoy each other's company, sometimes we have an actual fear of being left too much alone. Loneliness is a deeply held fear for many people. People marry, people have children, sometimes really less out of a selfless desire to love and more out of an anxiety that if I don't, I might end up all by myself. A strange twist, the way human nature is. At least my children and my spouse will have to take care of me. Master speaks for this reason that the deepest and the purest form of love is friendship. Because friendship is the only form of human love that has no element of compulsion in it. You know, the child feels the need to take care of the mother has to take care of the child, the husband and wife have an obligation to each other. Everything has some element, whether it's actually acted upon or not, but there's a have to. Friendship is the only thing that's entirely freely given. Even the master and the disciple, there's an obligation on both sides. So Swamiji described in himself these two realities that were always in him. One was the thought that he could live entirely by himself. Sri Yukteswar in the Holy Science describes that at a certain point, the heart becomes so purified in its ability to love unconditionally that it no longer needs the polishing that comes from interaction with other human beings. Until that time, Sri Yukteswar puts it, we are compelled to be in relationship with one another. And isn't that exactly what it feels like? Even when we sort of wish we didn't have that compulsion, because sometimes it's quite inconvenient. People wish for relationships they don't have. They wish for the relationships they have to be different. They wish for the parents to be other than they are. Sometimes friends of mine were having a lot of difficulty with their son, and they went to Swami Kriyananda. They just didn't know what to say. They said, no matter what we do, it just doesn't seem to work. And Swami shocked them first by saying, well, maybe you just got a lemon. Like that. He's very impersonal about these things. And after he let that possibility sort of sink into their shocked minds, he said, but I don't think so. And then he went on from there. And in the end, everything actually all worked out. But like it or not, we find ourselves trapped in these interrelationships. So there comes a point, though, where we realize that all the love that we're trying to experience by having an external form through which to receive it and into which to pour it is actually not the source or the cause of what we're actually seeking inside. Now, in our reading today, Swamiji talks a lot about how a master's consciousness is very different than our own. The average human being can't really separate the experience of love from all those things that draw it out of us. And we mistake the form for the essence of it. But people experience everything very differently, and what the spiritual path is really all about is gradually, on an ever deeper level, getting to the real core of what it is that we're trying to experience. And this is where, again, our reading speaks today of penetrating to the bliss nature of all things in creation. Now, the other side of our human nature, and I was starting to say with Swamiji's dual nature, is that on one hand, he imagines and longs for the thought of just moving away from the complexity and the confusion of all these whirling human consciousnesses and living purely in a relationship to God. And the other side of it is, he says, and he sort of puts it this way a little ruefully, darn it, as soon as I find out anything that I think is worth having, the first thing I think about is to run out and tell everybody I can find. And so the two sides are always playing with him. I mean, he's totally enthusiastic, and every joy is increased by passing it on to others, whatever it is. You know, his leadership of Ananda has always been very interesting, because there's never been any element of compulsion in it. He simply has these inner experiences, he has this relationship with Master, he has this enthusiasm for sharing Master's teachings, and he does that. And if you want to go along for the ride, you're more than welcome, and if you don't, then that's your choice. Often people are a little disconcerted by him because they'll come to him with challenging questions and demanding this and wanting him to explain that, and he's just extremely uninterested in persuading you. If you see it and want it, he's more than happy to share. But if you're challenging and think it's not for you, even when people ask him so simple a question is, well, do you think I need a guru? He says, no, not if you don't think you do. Just like that. But the point, you may reach the point where you realize you do, but until then, no, of course you don't. Because there's nothing that we can persuade others unless we are already inwardly on the vibration where we can see it ourselves. So when he was talking to my friend about her expanding sense of joy, what he was saying in a real sense was, you might say he was hinting at his own consciousness. Because what so often happens with us is we get a tiny little glimpse of what the infinity of divine consciousness might be like. And because our cup is so small, we think, oh my, look at me, I'm all filled up. In the practice of Kriya, Swamiji often cautions us, just because you get a little bliss, don't stop doing your Kriya, because you don't realize how much deeper you can really go. I mean, in any one particular meditation, I don't mean saying, oh, I don't need to meditate anymore. I was amused by some self-declared teacher. I don't mean to be rude to him, but I think he was more self-declared than God known, as the phrase is used. He said, I used to meditate, but now I'm just enlightened. I love that. Yes, it's true that one can pass beyond the needs for practices, but the tendency to stop too soon is very great. So what Swamiji and what the masters are telling us is we need to contemplate very deeply, and this is what the Gita said, those who know my secret of life on earth, I meaning the infinite, then once you have penetrated into that secret, you yourself become the same as that. And this time of year when Jesus is born, we have this extraordinary image, and we tell the story, especially when we talk about it for children. We have the story of the star, and the Star of Bethlehem, is just like a central theme in the whole story of the life of Jesus. All the Christmas cards, all the paintings, you see the stable, and then you see that beautiful beaming light, and you hear the story of the three wise men, how they went forth, and the star went before them, and wherever they went, the star was in front of them. And you sort of have a little bit of trouble kind of with the geography of the thing. They're going to the east, the star appears in the east, and they're heading, which direction are they heading, and what happened when it was covered by hills, and how did it get there, and all of it is just sort of brushed under the concept of God can do miraculous things. But in the book of Revelations, the disciple John, who went off to the island of Patmos after Jesus died and had profound and deep experiences, which he wrote in the book of Revelations, which is not so easy to understand, he says, they shall see his face, and his name will be in their foreheads. And there will be no night, And there will be no need for the sun and no need for a candle flame. And it sounds like, what are we talking about? Their name will be in his name will be in the forehead. That leads to the idea that the elect have something sort of tattooed on there that only God can see. But what he's actually saying is exactly 100% what Paramhansa Yogananda came and taught in explicit words later. All of you who've taken even our most basic meditation classes, the simple thing that we start with, one closes one's eyes, you lift your eyes just above the horizon line, and with closed eyes, one sees, as soon as the mind is calm, a great and beautiful light. And that light is literally in the forehead. It's not in the forehead in the sense of kind of crossing your eyes. Sri Yukteswar says the spiritual path is difficult enough without trying to do it cross-eyed. Some people imagine that, well, it's somewhere like in the brain, and you take the brain apart and try to find it. They're doing medical experiments to prove that near-death experiences are actually an illusion. It's just a question of neurons firing in certain ways, that everything is really just matter and there's nothing else. But anyone with any sensitivity and intuition knows it's not true. And we learn in our meditation classes, you look, and what gradually forms in front of you is, well, the image that we have there. The spiritual eye, we call it. The golden circle. The vivid blue deep ring, and right in the center, a 5-pointed star. I mean, not something that just sort of looks like a star, but actually literally a 5-pointed star. Everything in this world is a symbol of something deeper. We tend to think that that eye that we see, the light that we see in the spiritual eye, is a symbol of the sun, but it's actually the reverse. The sun is the symbol of the spiritual eye. You see, we have to take everything we think about this material world, and we have to expand and realize that the material world just floats as this tiny little manifestation of the infinite spirit. And it's everything, it takes everything we have to constantly be pulling our consciousness back into that center point. And that's why the masters incarnate. They take form in human bodies, in human birth, and live among human beings to try to show us not merely or only this is how great we are, but actually this is who you are. And this is who you can become. And that's why the name is in the forehead. It's right inside of us. So we use the experience of the baby being born in order to break out of this extremely small-minded, timid consciousness that we have. And this story of the baby Jesus being born is one of the most powerful symbolic and literal tales that we can be engaged in. First you have, as I've often talked about, you have the tiny little baby, and everybody's heart is softened and awakened by the sight of that baby. It's paradoxical, because on one hand, even in the very story of Jesus, even as he's lying tiny in the manger, because we all know the end of the tale, we know that he's eventually crucified and takes upon himself the sins of all of us. Yogananda described it in the most interesting way. Well, not speaking so much of the crucifixion, but he said about himself, he said, God has given me the power to dissolve people's delusions. So whoever comes to me with a receptive consciousness, God has given me the power to dissolve their delusions. Yesterday, Swamiji, in our all-day meditation, we were listening a little bit to Swamiji speaking, and he was talking about Master. And he said an avatar has a fully self-realized Master, one who is in Christ consciousness, like Jesus or Yogananda or a Buddha. What characterizes their power is not that they're more infinite than others. I mean, how can you even say that? Or that they're more unique. It can't be done. Once we are eternal, once we have embraced the infinite, everything that's infinite is infinite. There's no difference. But the avatar born free has the power to liberate as many as will come to him. That's why Jesus could say he died to absolve the sins of the whole world, of everyone here. That's why John could say, as many as received him, to them gave he the power to become what he called the sons of God, which is to realize their oneness with the infinite. And that's how Yogananda put it. God has given me the power to dissolve your delusions. What are our delusions? Well, the first delusion is that we're here at all. Yogananda said, if you could see yourselves as I see you, you would realize that you are nothing but beautiful light. Even the most, even a scientist who doesn't believe in God at all, they're all telling us that this material world that we imagine isn't here, that behind all of this is energy. And behind that energy, there's this light force. It's the one constant in the universe, is this light. Even literally, as we look around the room and look at one another, what we see is not the reality of what's actually there. And when the masters live in this world, when the great saints live in this world, they don't see it in all this separateness. What they see is this undulating, beautiful field of light behind it all. And all of spiritual practice, especially the practice of meditation, we go into that inner reality. We see, as John said, the face of the divine. What is the face? We don't see like this little face. Oh, look, there's the divine nose. There's the divine eyes, There's the divine mustache, It's nothing like that. Yes, the divine takes these personified forms, but the face of God is the being of infinity. And the being of infinity is light. It's Satchidananda, ever existing, eternal, ever conscious, ever new bliss. And that's what moves us through life, isn't it? Yogananda, his first book that he wrote for Americans was called The Science of Religion. Swamiji re-expressed it more. Yogananda didn't write the book himself. It was written by a disciple because he didn't know English that well. So Swami wrote it again, called God is for Everyone. And Yogananda came to America with this extremely simple principle. He didn't come with the goddess Shiva and the goddess Lakshmi and this and that, and he didn't come as a conventional Christian, traditional Christian in that sense. He came with a very simple principle, the science of religion, and this is the science. Everyone is seeking happiness. Everyone really is seeking more than happiness. They're seeking everlasting bliss. Everyone wishes to escape suffering. Just look at yourself for 10 minutes at a time. Introspect for a whole day. Every action we take is based on the idea that somehow this will help me to escape suffering, or this will bring me closer to bliss. The whole of the spiritual path is simply that. And it's based on this single divine secret, which is the face of the infinite is bliss, and that bliss consciousness is written in the forehead, which is to say, as soon as we draw our consciousness in, and also you see the forehead has to do with this esoteric of the two eyes versus the single eye. As long as our two eyes are open, what we see in this world is all this oscillating duality, isn't it? I look around this room, I see men and women, I see light and shadow, I see health and coughing, I see all the different dualities that are playing themselves out, cold and heat, everything. And as long as we see the world through the senses, it's always going to be this constant interplay. And as long as we try to make our happiness through what we see when we look outside of ourselves, then we incarnate again and again. That's why in the Bhagavad Gita it says, those who know me, meaning the infinite Lord, Krishna speaking, know the Christ consciousness as it truly is, they come unto me and are never pulled down again, meaning you don't ever have to reincarnate. You may come to choose because of that conflicting desire to be with the infinite and also to share with others, but you never have to be pulled down again, because it's considered down to come into this world in which there's joy for a while and then there's suffering, where things go well and then they don't. Not everyone believes that. Sometimes people criticize me, you should talk more about the beauty of life. Well, I'm very conscious of the beauty of life, and I'm also conscious how nothing lasts. It's not that I or a spiritual person lives in this sorrowful world of nothing lasts, low, death is coming. It's actually just the opposite. It's that, oh, behind this ever-changing, there is this infinite spirit. And we move literally by closing our eyes, and this is the inner practice of meditation. This is what Jesus said. He didn't write it explicitly. The kingdom of God will not be found by looking, as he put it, low here and low there, meaning looking around outside yourself. The kingdom of God is within. Yogananda taught more explicitly, close the two physical eyes. Lift inwardly your eyes upward to the Spirit, and there you will see his face, for his name is written in your forehead. So now, this time of year, when Christ is being born in this beautiful allegorical story of the baby and the angels and the wise men and the shepherd, it's such a time to be a child. Perhaps because I came onto this later in life, being raised Jewish and never really celebrating Christmas until I came to Ananda. The first time I experienced Christmas was this vivid experience of an all-day meditation and this profoundly deep, inwardly uplifting energy. This is why Swamiji said to my friend, draw it in, because the little bit of positive light that we get, if we bring that energy back to its source, and that doesn't mean that we don't smile or we don't enjoy or we don't love everyone, but the more deeply we can feel whatever little bubble of joy arises on the outside, that we trace it back to its source in inner consciousness. Because you see, all we ever experience is our inner consciousness. No matter how we may attribute it to all these external causes, oh, the family's all together for Christmas, oh, we had such a wonderful time at dinner, oh, our football team won, whatever it might be that causes our spirits to go up a little bit. If we look inside, we realize all that we're ever experiencing is our inner response to that. Well, where is the end point of that idea? How deeply can we trace everything to its source? And that's what the practice of the spiritual path is. Who am I? Where does this joy come from? Where does this experience come from? And the more deeply we introspect, closing the two eyes on the changing world, looking into that inner light, the more deeply we penetrate the secret of the divine birth of those we call the masters. And by contemplating their lives, by caring enough to contemplate their lives, we put ourselves in tune with that consciousness. And God has given those masters the power to dissolve our delusions. And our delusions, no matter how many multitudinous forms they take, like the forest of a tree, like the plants that grow from a single grain of rice, they all have one root. And that one root is the thought that the external world creates my inner reality, instead of the understanding that everything emanates from that divine within. And once I live in the power and presence of that divine within, then everything about this universe becomes merely a reflection of that inner consciousness. And this is why the baby Jesus was visible to the great wise men, because his name was in their forehead. They were in tune with his consciousness, and they could follow the light of that inner intuition right to where he was. This is why Jesus could be born into that incarnation and go forward with such courage as a grown man to just follow the path that he knew would lead in what would appear to the world to be great suffering and death, but it meant nothing to him, because all of that was the oscillating world of the ups and downs of life and death. But his reality was one. His reality always, his star, that inner Christ consciousness. And the great promise of this divine season is in the words of John, as many as received him, to them gave he the very power that he himself had. Master said, all those who come to me, God has given me the power to dissolve their delusions. Nothing is taken away from us. Nothing is lost. We simply see who we are and what we already have for what it really is. A wave on the ocean of bliss, a reflection of the divine light within. This is the season of the birth of Christ. But it doesn't really matter a lot that he was born in the manger unless we receive that consciousness into the manger of our own hearts. An obvious and much repeated image, but one that never grows tiresome, because Satchidananda is ever new bliss. That's why year after year we come back to the same reality with ever new eagerness, because each time we experience it, you see, it's ever new for us. We are ever new in our upliftment. We are ever new in our revelation of our infinite divine self.